healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Luke 6:12-13. During those days he went out to the mountain to pray and spent all night in prayer to God. When daylight came, he summoned his disciples and he chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. Mark 1:35-36. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he got up, went out, and made his way to a deserted place, and there he was praying. Simon and his companions searched for him. Mark 6:31-32. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in the boat by themselves to a remote place. Matthew 14:13. When Jesus heard about it, he withdrew from there by boat to a remote place to be alone. When the crowds heard this, they followed him on foot from the towns. Mark 14:32. When they came to a place named Gethsemane, and he told his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." Mark 1:9-12. Mark 4:1-4. Luke 9:18. Matthew 11:28.
That ended a little more abruptly than I thought it would. I was waiting for the next thing to happen, and then nothing happened, so I was like, well, I guess it's time to go. But good morning, my name's Daniel. I'm obviously not Pastor Craig, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this. I do my best never to stand on stage next to him, because I don't want you guys to see the 2-foot height difference in reality. So I really try to avoid it as much as I can. So I try to preach when he's not here, so I don't have to. But so if you're a first-time guest, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to preach. It is such a blessing to be able to try and share some truth from God's Word with you guys. And if you're a first-time guest or you're some of our family already, this is a great Sunday to be here because we're starting a brand new series called Getaway. And the whole idea is what are the healthy rhythms that we can look through the New Testament and see that Jesus followed through with and modeled for us and then apply them to our lives? How can we have these healthy rhythms? How can we get away from the busyness of life, and how can we just take some time to recover? And so I've recently graduated from college, and I know you guys probably remember that really bad picture Ben put up of me a couple weeks ago. And so I don't have access to the slides, but I will probably get them back somehow. But with this newfound information, I've learned these I learned a few extra things, but I don't know if you guys know this, but the human body needs certain things to survive. I know that might be news to you. I know it's probably very surprising, but like you need air and water and food and sleep, and you need, stable temperatures to some degree. Like there's a range of temperatures we can survive in. And I know that was news to me, right? But there's also, depending on your worldview, in a Christian worldview, you would be more than a body. You'd have more than those few things you'd need to survive. You'd have spiritual needs, you'd have social needs, and you have these mental needs you have. And what I want to talk about today is a few of these spiritual needs and these things that we need to have in our life, especially as Christians, to have a healthy spirit and to have that system and that intentionality about recovering and having these rhythms. And Dr. Kuthra was up here last week, and he told this story about when they started their hospital in northern Pakistan. He said they set limits early because if they burn themselves out really quickly, their impact would be much shorter. So they wanted to have a sustainable ministry. They didn't want to have a really good week. They wanted to have a long-lasting ministry. So he said they set limits early. And that's kind of the whole idea is what do we need to do in our life, in our schedule, and have these healthy rhythms so we can have a sustainable ministry for the long one. So the one point we have for today, the one point I hope we can wrap everything around is just this one idea, is we need to prioritize getting away with God. We need to prioritize getting away with God. Now, life gets busy. I 100% understand that, and I've been through those ebbs and flows, and I'm guilty of being distracted by so many things that pile up on my to-do list, and I'm sure you can understand that. And a couple weeks ago, I was caught up with all these things I was trying to do, and I was getting ready to graduate, and Jenna was getting ready to go back to a ship, and she was getting ready to go underway, and the laundry was piling up, and all these things were adding up, and I wasn't really being attentive, and I wasn't really paying attention, and I wasn't being intentional with these rhythms. And I started to forget to do very simple things, like I would just skip breakfast and lunch because I would just be going and going, and I wasn't praying like I should, and I wasn't reading my Bible like I should, and it all sort of boiled up to this one weekend. And I remember there was this particular Friday and Saturday, I was going to put up a new shed, and I was reading through the manual, and I'm like, okay, I kind of understand the pictures, and I was laying out the pieces, like I said, and laying out the pieces over here, and getting ready, and I was like, oh, I should probably check the weather. So I pulled up my phone, it's going to rain. And I was like, well, this is an outdoor shed. It should be fine. Not a big deal. It's like, okay, got time, got a couple hours. Went inside my house, got some water. I was like, okay, still got time. Came back out of my house, and my precious dog was biting pieces of my shed and dragging them through the yard. And I was like, man, that really aggravated me, more than it should have. And I was like, okay. So I knew if I chased him, he would run faster. So finally, I got the pieces back, and now I'm like guarding them in the yard and waiting for the rain. And a couple hours goes by, and the sun's getting lower, and I see this rain supposed to happen in an hour or so. I'm like, okay, I got time. It's an outdoor shed. It'll be fine. What I wasn't anticipating was this giant wall of rain is coming towards me. 20 and 30 mile per hour gusts of wind start coming through the yard and taking all of my nicely laid out pieces of my shed and flipping them through the yard. So now my project's got more complicated. So now I'm trying to keep the dog from eating the pieces, and I'm trying to stop the pieces from blowing into my neighbor's yard, and I'm stressed. And I'm trying to stack everything back up, and I'm exhausted, and I'm tired, and now it's starting to rain, and it's getting really dark, and I'm like, okay, I got to get all this done. And I finally bust in the back door and throw my tools down, and I'm standing there, and I was exhausted. And I was like, why did that aggravate me so much? Usually I'm pretty aware when these things start building up, and I take a step back, and I'm like, what's really going on? But it was building. I wasn't really paying attention. And then the next Monday, like that was a Friday and Saturday, and Monday, Jen and I get back from work, and we're talking, and she said something, and I said something a little mean, and then she said, I'm not going to say anything back because I'm going to say something mean back. So I was like, well, fine. So now we're fighting. So now I go to bed. We wake up the next morning. We don't say anything. She goes to work. I go to work. I go to this training, and in the training, they talk about leadership. And they're talking about you need to support and challenge yourself to be better before you can do that for someone else. And they were talking about something they'd talked about 3 months ago, and it just, right over my head. I remember listening to that, and I was like, all right, cool. Lead myself, lead others. Anyways, lead others. That's what I'm just going to do for right now. And just right past it, right over my head. And if I'd have been standing up here a few weeks ago and said, hey, guys, we need to have healthy rhythms because it just makes you better, I'd have been such a big hypocrite because I didn't have healthy rhythms. I was just going through the motions. I was exhausted. All these things were piling up, and I wasn't taking time to be healthy. And all of that led to me being a very grumpy person. So I texted Jenna, and I was like, hey, I'm reflecting, and I'm sorry I was out of line. And when I was like, we'll talk about it when I go home. So we got home. We had a conversation. I explained how I wasn't being intentional and how I was exhausted and overwhelmed. I hadn't been communicating that, and how I just felt like everything was piling up. And instead of relying on her to help support me and doing things to be supported myself, I was just internalizing it all. And I was exhausted. And I was like, man, I felt like butter over too much bread, in the words of Bobo Baggins. I was exhausted. And she said, you've been a little mean lately. And then I felt kind of bad. And I was like, I know. I'm sorry. All of this was building up. And on top of that, the irony was that I'd been doing training to learn to lead myself better and have these rhythms. I was prepping for this message to talk about having healthy rhythms. I was reading books that were talking about the place you need to start with self-leadership is having healthy rhythms in your life. And I was just missing the whole point, just going right over my head. And I was like, man, what have I been doing? So we had that conversation, and luckily I had the opportunity to reflect. But I'm sure that I'm the only person here who's ever experienced that. I mean, surely you guys don't get caught up in the busyness of life, and you don't get caught up in the laundry and the schedule and the weekly tasks and the appointments, and I'm sure we can understand that. I'm sure we can probably relate on some level. When things get piled up, we kind of just get a little overwhelmed, and if we're not intentional, we're caught off guard. Why are we aggravated at this? Why does our patience feel so low? Why do we feel so exhausted all of a sudden? Why are these happening to us? And Dr. Kutho's point about setting limits for a sustainable ministry, that's not just ministry, right? Setting limits for yourself, setting boundaries, having healthy practices is life. That's not only church. Every single one of us have to do that, and we have to be intentional about it, because being intentional, that's not going to happen naturally. That's something you have to dedicate time to focus on, dedicate time into your schedule. And so I started understanding more and more, and I'm understanding more now, and I'm learning more now, how when life gets busy and we get overwhelmed, we need to intentionally prioritize the time set aside to focus on having these rhythms, because they're not going to naturally happen to us. And sometimes it's necessary for a season. Sometimes we have a couple months in a period where it's just exhausting. Like everything's just coming together, and this is the worst 3 months of the year, and you're exhausted. But the point is, it's a season. It's not sustainable. And if you're not intentional, even during those seasons, you'll get exhausted. You'll get worn out. And the people closest to you are going to experience that firsthand. You're going to take it out on them. And that's not how we should be trying to lead ourselves and lead our families. And so I'm not saying being busy is wrong. Right? Being busy happens. It's a part of life, especially today in today's age. One of the things we try to consider on church a lot is, are we just adding busyness to people's lives, or are we actually adding value? And how are we communicating that to people? I'm saying we have to be careful. We have to schedule in these healthy rhythms, because they're not going to find themselves into our schedule. If you don't set your schedule out, if you don't write out, this is what I'm doing, and you're not intentional with this, and you're not prioritizing the time with God, someone else is going to run your schedule for you. You're just going to be reactionary to everything that's happening. Next thing you know, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to be trying to get your dog to stop eating your shed parts. You're going to be trying to figure out what's going on, and you're going to be looking back like, why am I so tired all of a sudden? And maybe you're in this new phase of life. Maybe you're maybe you're starting that season. Maybe you just came out of that season. Maybe you've got trying to finish up high school. Maybe you're trying to get ready for college, and you're trying to figure out all the classes, and you don't know what MLA or APA means, and you're just trying to figure out what college is. And maybe you've got a young kid, and every time you start to finally understand what Lucy's doing, she goes through a developmental phase, and now she's running faster and doing this and talking, and you're like, okay, I finally got that figured out. Or maybe you've got a couple kids, and you're trying to figure out your schedule, and you're trying to deconflict the schedule with your spouse, and maybe you're trying to figure out, how am I going to get my kids to this place and then to that place, and then get to the PTA, and then get to church, and then get back to work, and then get back to my spouse, and how am I going to do this and this and this? And maybe that's where you're at right now, or maybe you just left that, or maybe you're seeing it on the horizon where life's about to get really busy. Summer's only a couple months. And so whenever we're sitting in that moment and we're looking back, what are we supposed to do with this? Life is busy. We can't really get around that. And Jesus modeled something for us 2,000 years ago. He modeled these healthy rhythms, and that's the whole point of this series, is what can we see? What can we take a look into the New Testament and say, okay, Jesus, what did Jesus do? What can we follow behind and do? And so we take a look at, if we turn to Luke 5:12, and I want you to think about Jesus in this moment. Okay, Jesus was very popular. Like, a lot of people wanted to talk to him. I don't know many people in this building who have had 5,000 people who want to come listen to him talk, or more than 5,000. Jesus had people coming across the countryside to hear him. And he's not just the only messianic figure in the time period. There's other people who are rising up, and they're trying to pick fights with the Romans, and they're trying to pick fights with these people, and they're doing this, and these guys are getting killed, and all these things are happening. And the common people are hearing these stories, or this figure is over here doing stuff, and, well, this guy over here is preaching repentance. But he's also healing people. Like, people who are blind are now seeing, and people who had leprosy don't have leprosy anymore, and people who couldn't walk are now walking. Like, what's happening? And I've even heard these rumors where he raised people from the dead, and they're like, no, that one's not real. That's no. And so imagine this, right? There's all these people coming to talk to him, and they don't want to just sit in the audience and listen to him speak. No, they want to have a face-to-face conversation, because they want to be healed. They got something wrong with them, and they're like, Jesus, I need you. And so even the most extroverted person, after a while, would become exhausted. I mean, that's a lot. Thousands of people wanting to talk with you. And Jesus was human. And so we see this in Luke 5:12 through 16 playing out. And it says, while he was in one of the towns, a man was there who had leprosy all over him. He saw Jesus, fell face down, and begged him, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. Reaching out his hand, Jesus touched him, saying, I am willing, be made clean. And immediately the leprosy left him. Then he ordered him to tell no one, but go and show yourself to the priest and offer what Moses commanded for your cleansing as a testimony to them. But the news about him spread even more, and large crowds would come together to hear him and be healed of their sicknesses. Yet he often withdrew to deserted places and prayed. That's the key word there. Yet he often withdrew to deserted places and prayed. In the middle of the busyness, in the middle of, he has the most important mission of any human being on the planet. He is the Savior. He's the one that is bringing salvation to God's people. And even in the middle of healing people and talking to them and preaching repentance and trying to explain the kingdom of heaven and trying to get this generation of people to understand, he would say, okay, time out. I've got to take some time, prioritize getting away with God in the middle of all those pieces. And so surely Jesus understands life being busy, and I'm sure he's probably in some ways much more busy than we were, and he's probably more exhausted. He's walking where he needs to go. He's carrying things. He's preaching. He's healing. He's trying to pour into other people. And he's exhausted. And even in life's busyness, he said, you know what? I'm going to take some time. I'm going to get away with God. And so if Jesus, the Son of God, is saying this is what he does, and he's showing us, and they're telling this story, and they're including these details, shouldn't we consider that and look at it in a different light? Shouldn't we evaluate the importance of something? If Jesus is saying, even in the middle of me having the most important mission on the planet, I'm taking time and I'm getting away with God. And so we see in Luke 6, 12 through 13, it says, during those days he went out to the mountain to pray and spent all night in prayer to God. When daylight came, he summoned his disciples, and he chose 12 of them, whom he also named apostles. So we see Jesus, he's busy. There's a lot of things going on. He's really trying to be relational and interact with these people. And he's trying to teach his disciples, but now he's picking out apostles. So he's got a really big decision with a lot of weight. And he's elevating these gentlemen to have much more responsibility than they had. And he takes the time. He says, you know what? More important than sleep tonight, I'm going to prioritize this time with God. I want to make sure that my heart is in line with God's will. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision here. And to be honest, this one was a little difficult for me to include because I am a huge fan of naps and sleeping. So I was like, I wish I'd have read a different passage before I started this because I like sleep. So to get up here and say, well, maybe we just shouldn't sleep and we should spend time with God, I was like, there's some other passages I could include and just kind of skip over this part, right? But that's the truth. Like Jesus, he recognized that more than sleep at times, he would prioritize this time with God. It wasn't just a healthy rhythm for him, but it also seemed like a crucial part of his decision-making process. He's got a big decision. In the middle of being busy, in the middle of trying to heal people, in the middle of making a decision, when all the things are piling up, and Jesus could have been like, you know what, I'm actually just going to get a good night's rest, and I'm going to say, I need some good sleep before I decide to do this. No, he said, I'm going to prioritize getting away with God. So if Jesus is showing us this is where his priorities are, then we really need to consider why he's doing that. We need to look at our life and see if it models that. And if you're not, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to stay up all night doing something. I've done it a couple times in the military on different watches and stuff, and you have to kind of be focused on something because if you're just kind of there, you'll end up like the disciples in the garden where Jesus is like, hey, I need you to pray. I'm going to go over here and pray. Just pray for me, okay? Just sit and pray. And you're going to be like the disciples. You're kind of there. You're attentive. You're like, all right, cool. All right, I'm praying, I don't know what Jesus is going through, but I really hope he can help. And you're praying, and then you're sleeping, and Jesus comes back, hey, I need you to pray. You have to be intentional. You have to be focused. Jesus was literally stress sweating over there, and the disciples are taking a nap, right? And so if you're not focused on something, you're going to fall asleep. So the fact that Jesus is like, no, I want to model this for you should show us something. He's like, you have to be intentional. I'm not just saying stay awake, try to stay awake and stare at the wall. I'm saying, no, be intentional, be focused. And so we see this intentionality appearing again and again throughout the Bible. And so when Jesus begins his ministry, when he's busy, when he's trying to heal people, when he's trying to help people, when he's trying to bring salvation to God's people, and when he's got to make a big decision, he prioritizes getting away with God. And I want you to wonder, is this rhythm in our life? And if it is it so ingrained that we would consider it a part of our decision-making process? And the last passage we're going to turn to is Luke 10, 38 through 42. And so it says, while they were traveling, he entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. And that's an interesting detail to throw in there, and I want to point it out because during this time, it was odd for women to be doing this because this was the posture of a disciple. This is the posture of someone who's sitting down listening to their teacher. So they're making this connection here, and the author is pointing out she was sitting like the disciples were and was listening to Jesus teaching. She wasn't just kind of sitting over there doing nothing. Like she was focused, she was listening. She was probably very interested in what he had to say. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, and she came up and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? So tell her to give me a hand. And I'm not about to try and paint Martha in this terrible light where she's distracted. I want you to imagine her situation for a second, right? Martha is probably really stressed out right now. I'm imagining this story playing out where she hears Jesus is coming into town, or maybe she just sees him walking through, and she's like, oh my goodness, Jesus, this is the guy we've been hearing about. You know, I've heard him speak on the mount. I heard him speak over here, and I've heard people talking about him. Just come to my house. And I imagine she opened up the door for them, and as she looked inside her house, she was like, ooh, I should have brushed that a little more. I should have swept up over there. Ooh, maybe I should put this away. And now she's got a bunch of disciples sitting inside the house, and she's got Jesus sitting there, this really, prominent figure in the moment. And she's like, oh my goodness, I gotta get some refreshments. I gotta get food, and I gotta go clean this up, and I gotta get some water, and I gotta make sure they got some stuff to clean their hands with, and I gotta. And I don't know about you, but when someone's coming over to my house, we're cleaning up a lot. So I'm sure she was a little stressed, a little distracted. And I imagine she walked into the living room, and she saw Mary sitting there listening, and she was trying to get her attention. She was like, hey. And she's, okay, I'm going back to the kitchen. She goes back and cleans, or does whatever she's got to do. And then she comes back out. And then she's trying to get Mary's attention. Hey, Mary. And Mary's locked in on Jesus. And she's stressed. And she's like, I really wish Mary would help me bear this burden right now. I'm overwhelmed. I'm freaking out. Jesus is sitting in my living room. And Mary's locked in on Jesus. And she's like, Jesus. I was laughing. She's like, Lord, Son of God, can you tell her to help me? I always thought that was funny. But she's sitting there, and I imagine she's stressed, right? And so Jesus, he listens to this, and he seems to sort of go around this issue she's brought up and goes right to the heart of the issue. And he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and it will not be taken away from her. In the middle of life's busyness, in the middle of the scheduling and the trips, and in the middle of trying to figure out what you're going to do for vacation this year, and in the middle of trying to get the bills paid, and in the middle of the Hampton Roads utility billing service coming through the email, and the personal property tax, and all these things piling up, in the middle of all of that, in the middle of hosting people, there's one thing that's the right choice. There's one thing that's necessary. Sitting at the feet of Jesus and listening, prioritizing that time with God. That's what Jesus points out is the right thing to do in that moment. And I'm not saying neglect your obligations and responsibilities. I'm not saying go lock yourself in a closet for 7 days a week and just say, well, I just got to only prioritize God. That's it. I just got to pray. I'm saying that when you start evaluating whether you should sleep an extra 10 minutes or spend some time with God because you haven't been able to that day and you know you're not going to get to the next day, prioritize getting away with God. When you're trying to figure out what the schedule's going to look like for the week and for the month, and you're not really sure what's going on, and you're trying to figure out what's going to fit where, prioritize getting away with God. When you've got a big decision coming up, and you're like, man, I don't know what to do. I got to buy this house, or I got to do this, and maybe I'm going to do a life change, and I'm going to move somewhere else, and maybe I'm going to change jobs, and I don't know what to do, and I'm stressed out, and on top of that, I got all these things I have to attend. Prioritize getting away with God. Getting away with God is not a magical moment. That's not what I want to paint, where it's like if you just go check in the box, you're good. I'm not saying go step into the closet, take a knee, do a Tim Tebow, say the Lord's Prayer, and stand up ready to go. And just, that's today's good. I read my YouVersion Bible app, I'm good. I'm saying spend some time intentionally connecting with God, opening up this line of communication and saying, okay, God, how can I pour out my heart to you and listen to what you're saying? How can I prioritize this time with you and be intentional with you? It's not just a check in the box. It's opening up a line of communication with someone who wants what's best for you and who knows you better than anybody else. And surely this person, this God, knows that the best thing you can do is spend time with him. If you spend time with God, that's the best thing you can do. And he wants you to do that. And he's got this line of communication open. You see, we do this. We set this time aside and we spend time with God because, as the psalmist points out, I am at rest in God alone. And as James 5:16 points out, the prayer of a righteous person is very powerful in its effect. Right, we do this because God told us to, because Jesus modeled it for us, Because this is the first step to finding rest. Because it's powerful. So now that I've dropped this incredibly new and insightful information on you, and you're sitting there and you're like, okay, now what? What's the point? What is the whole point of this? Hopefully you understand the one point of prioritizing getting away with God. But I want you to consider emotional check engine lights in your life. Whenever your emotions start to hit the extremes, and maybe your patience is really low and your anger just seems to spike really fast, or maybe you're really depressed and you're exhausted, and maybe all these things, and you're on those extreme ends of the spectrum of emotions, and you're usually pretty good and pretty neutral and pretty relaxed or pretty consistent. Just like pain serves for your body as an indicator of, hey, something's wrong, maybe you shouldn't cut your finger with that, right? That's the same thing your emotions do. When they start reaching those extreme ends, it's letting you know something's wrong, something's not right, something's not working. When my shed started rolling through the yard and it aggravated me way more than it should have, that was a ding ding. There's the check engine light. Why does this bother me so much? Why is this really getting under my skin? It's just a shed. I'll just roll it back over there. Why is this bothering me so much? Whenever you see these emotional check engine lights, that's your cue to take a step back, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, when was the last time I connected with God? When was the last time I had this rhythm going? Because falling out of that rhythm, it sneaks up on you. You don't plan on it. You don't move it out of your schedule on purpose. You don't prioritize other things on purpose. They just kind of happen, right? And they serve to let you know that something's not right. Whenever I was in the Marine Corps, we would do these specific exercises, these different training exercises. And sometimes we'd be on a range, or sometimes we'd do these things called PB ops. And there was these times throughout the night where you would just be awake for an hour on your watch. And you just kind of be sitting there. So you'd be standing there, and there'd be a whole bunch of guys sleeping around you, and they're all snoring because they're goofballs, and they're sitting in their sleeping systems, and you've got this radio, and you've got your rifle, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to stand here and make sure no one steals anything. And at the end of the hour, you'd usually do a radio check with either range control or your headquarters. And it would sound something like, HNS, this is 3rd Platoon, radio check, over. And you'd want to hear back, 3rd Platoon, this is HNS, we hear you loud and clear. And if you had a really cool operator on the other side who was just really fun on the radio, he'd be like, we hear you, Lima Charlie. And you're like, okay, life's good. You'd be like, Roger, out. You'd put the radio down, you'd give it to the next guy, you'd go back to sleep. What you didn't want to happen was you go, HNS, this is 3rd Platoon, radio check. HNS, this is 3rd Platoon, radio check. Now you're like, maybe the battery's not connected, maybe this, I don't know what's going on, I gotta screw the antenna back in, I'm trying to do the phone signal thing, I don't understand, right? The last thing you wanted to happen was the radio to stop working, and I don't know what it was, but radios hate Marines. Like, they just hated us, they always broke. And now you gotta try and troubleshoot. Now you gotta wake up the radio guy and be like, hey, it's broken, I don't know what's going on. And that was the most inconvenient thing, because now you're like, man, I just want to get back in my bag and go to sleep, but I can't talk to anybody. And that's not a problem we have with God. The line of communication doesn't get broken. Nothing disrupts that. He's sitting there listening, waiting. And I'm willing to bet he spent time in your day, your personal day, putting things in place to remind you of him, trying to get your attention, trying to get that radio check. And we miss that. We don't have to miss that. He's there, he's waiting, he's listening. So, with all of that, the ask this week is really simple, right? The whole one point I hope you walk away from this remembering is that when it comes to healthy rhythms, when it comes to the getaway, prioritize getting away with God. And I try to bring everything down as practical as possible. And so if you don't have this healthy rhythm and you're like me, where sometimes it just slips away out of your schedule, I want you to be intentional this week. I'm asking for 70 more minutes of preaching. No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I'm asking for 70 minutes this week, right? That's 10 minutes a day. Starting small. Be consistent. From every day this week, every morning at 6 a.m. to 6:10, just say, this is a good time to set aside. Pull out your calendars, pull out your schedules, write it down in your notebook. Be as intentional as possible. And if you have this rhythm, awesome. Perfect. That's phenomenal. And if you know people who maybe are struggling with this rhythm, or maybe you're struggling with this rhythm, set the time aside now and treat this like you can't miss it. That's the ask. 10 minutes a day, 70 minutes. We're going to throw something up on Facebook with a little verse of the day you can read. You can use that as a springboard, or you can read your Bible, or maybe you've already got a plan. But that's the ask. If we want to prioritize getting away with God, that means prioritizing Sunday, what I'm going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That means I'm putting it on the calendar first. I'm not going to let anything else scoot it off. And imagine if we were as intentional about that window, right? And it can be any time. It doesn't have to be 6 to 6:10. Just as long as you're intentional, right? As long as Daniel's intentional and he's really making sure he connects with God. And if I was as intentional as I was with that, as I am with like business appointments or professional appointments or making sure my family gets where they need to go, we wouldn't cancel it, we'd reschedule it. We would set the time aside early, and we'd try not to prevent missing it. We'd stay a few minutes up later, or we'd wake up a few minutes early to make sure we were there for it. Because we'd be intentional. We'd prioritize it right there. Leading yourselves isn't about, it's not some magical process. It's about being intentional. And leading ourselves in these healthy rhythms and following the example of Jesus means recognizing that we need to prioritize getting away with Jesus, getting away with God. We need to prioritize our physical and spiritual health because we don't want a good week. We'd really like to have a sustainable life where we're really making an impact in the kingdom. We don't want to just have a couple good days. We want to make a lasting impact. We want to be there for our family for the long run. How can we be a part of something as important as the mission of Christianity if we're not leading ourselves? TAB is a church on mission. Since 1935, they've cared about taking the gospel from this place, from not this exact building, but from Norfolk to the nations. And Christianity is the whole point. We're here is to build a community and add people to this community. And how can we be a part of a mission so big and so important as sharing the gospel if we don't know the person we're sharing the gospel about? How can we play our part in this community if we're not leading ourselves? If we're not prioritizing these healthy rhythms in our life? And if we're not prioritizing the healthy rhythms in our life, how can we lead our family? You're just going to get grumpy like I was. And if you're not prioritizing these healthy rhythms to be able to lead your family, how can you expect to manage your teams at work? How can you expect to make an impact in the organization and stand out like salt and light? And if we can't even make it to that point, how can we possibly expect to share God's story in Norfolk and then make it all the way to the nations? You see how there's this ripple effect? It slowly builds out. It starts with, I'm a little busy, I didn't pray, or I'm a little preoccupied, I couldn't read my Bible. And then I forgot to pray with my spouse before going to sleep. And then I forgot to eat breakfast, and I forgot to eat lunch, and I had 3 dinners instead. Like, it's a ripple effect. It starts off small. Whoops, missed that appointment. Whoop, didn't read my Bible today. My bad. I'll get it tomorrow, right? But you don't really have it planned out. It's not intentional. It's just kind of like, well, whenever it's convenient, I'll do it. And then if it's not convenient, you don't do it. And imagine if we embraced that level of intentionality. Imagine if we said, okay, imagine the culture tab. If you called Daniel up on a Thursday afternoon and you said, hey, can you help me out Friday morning at 6 o'clock? And I said, no, I've got to talk to God. You'd be like, okay, can't you reschedule that? And I'd be like, well, I could, but then my priorities would be a little shifted. Imagine that culture. That'd be a little different, right? If we prioritized our time with God so much, we said, you know what? I will help you afterwards, but right at this exact moment, I've already scheduled time with God. We've got a standing appointment. I'm going to be there. It would be a little odd, and it would probably throw you off a little bit. But I would be willing to wager that we would have a much healthier community if we had a bunch of people that really prioritize their time with God, and we're like, I'm not going to miss this. This is important to me. And don't we want to be a part of a healthy community? No one wants to come and sit down on a Sunday morning with a bunch of grumps. Like, they want to be a part of a community that loves each other and cares for each other. We want to be a part of a community that encourages each other to do better, to grow, to prioritize time with God, to follow through with healthy rhythms. Like, you need to be eating, you need to be sleeping, you need to be praying, you need to be reading and breathing. Like, there's all these things you need to do. And that's the culture we want to see at TAB. We want to see a healthy culture who cares for each other, who loves each other. And if we embrace this idea, there are healthy rhythms we need to follow, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, which lead you to being a better person in the long run. We should be intentional about that now. So that's it. That's the ask. The ask is spend 70 minutes this week, if you don't already. Spend some time with God. And that's it. Just prioritize getting away with God. Whatever that looks like for you in your life, in your schedule, in your time, prioritize getting away with God. All right, I'm going to pray and we're going to dismiss. And thank you so much. Dear Lord, thank you so much for everything you do for us. We ask that you would just humble us. Give us patience. Give us wisdom. Help us to be able to look into our week and prioritize time with you, whether that's at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the evening, whatever time it is, Lord, just help us to orient our lives around a relationship with you and be intentional about that and be consistent with that, Lord, because we know that the best thing we can do for us is to pursue you as much as we possibly can. So I thank you, Lord, and I praise you, and I thank you for everything you do for us, and I thank you for this wonderful community we have at TAB, Lord, and I thank you for this family. And I see you go with us for this next week. Help us to be encouraged and inspired to be able to pursue you better. In Jesus' name we pray.